Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 43.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards. On today's show, I bring back Dr. Horatio Jug, and we talk about something we have far too much experience with, and that's how to handle practice BS. What do we mean by practice BS? All the different things that you have to handle in your practice on a day-to-day basis that just drive you crazy. How do you deal with it? What are the challenges? What's the mindset? Some skills, character traits, tactics, strategies that we have personally used and still personally use to try and manage and overcome and put behind you the practice BS that you need to deal with on a regular basis. So enjoy today's episode of Life by Design.
Horatio, welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Can't remember if this is 2 in a row or 3 in a row, but either way, it feels good to be back on top, Jamie.
Well, you were due, so it's good to have you back again, Horatio. And this is, I think this is actually the perfect episode for you in lots of different ways. And for me, there's a reason why we brought this episode up. But on both sides of the coin here, one, the conversation here today is going to be about all the BS that you have to deal with in practice. And I know that both of us have had more than enough BS to deal with in practice. But at the same time, one of your strengths is, the philosophy and understanding principles. So I think it's important that we have that conversation today because, we're going to spend some time in the second half of the show going through, practice-specific challenges that people have, whether it be what do you do when somebody drops out or when you're not getting enough new patients, people are unhappy, you're tired, you have stress at home, and a handful of other things we've actually mapped out and talked about in the pre-show, real problems that exist in practices, ones that I've gone through, that you've gone through, and I know lots of people listening go through these as well. So, but before we do, I think it's important to...
Still going through, man. Are you kidding me?
To a degree, right? And some of these have been resolved, some of these aren't an issue anymore, and some of these, bring up old wounds, just like they did, when the wounds were fresh. So the key to all of this, though, the key to it is, obviously the mindset and the psychology, and it's having that in place, understanding principles. There's some specific character traits that will benefit you. So I want to talk about that. And this is, the same, not just for your business. We've mentioned this over and over again. It's for your life. It's the same thing. It's the same when you have the BS at your own house or when you have the BS in your own personal life. It really is the same answer in order to solve that. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, Horatio. I'd like you to start off by chatting a bit about, this idea of certainty, because I think certainty, plays such a massive role in this. And, when it comes to certainty, I know you have, a nice framework and some commentary that would be valuable at this point.
Yeah, so we have to be really clear what we mean by certainty, right? In a couple of different senses. Certainty it's contextual. It's under certain conditions, and it just means that you understand all the possible. And I'm going like really big, macro, big picture here, and we'll dial it down into some really practical, tangible advice. But it means that you're certain in a certain context, you understand what could possibly happen, and you know all the possible outcomes. Now, why do you care about that? You care about that because, unfortunately, most chiropractors, hopefully not you listening, really don't understand chiropractic. And if you don't have a firm grasp on chiropractic and what it is that you're doing, and what it is that you can actually deliver and what the end benefit is to the person across from you. And if you aren't certain that you can deliver those things, and if you aren't certain what it is, that is an unshaky foundation. And you've heard us talk about this before many, many times, and it's called third paradigm chiropractic, which is, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's the only logical model of chiropractic. And that model is that when you are checking and correcting somebody for subluxation, they're always better off without being subluxated. Now, that doesn't mean that their symptom or condition is going to go away. It might go away. It might only go away, 31.5%. It might go away 72.5%. But you have to understand this concept so you can go ahead and communicate that to a way that is knowable and desirable to the person who's across from you, and you know clinically the results that you're looking for, what a positive test, technique dependent, again, contextually for you, what positive tests look like for subluxation, when somebody's clear for subluxation, so you can be a good clinician and you can be a good doctor to guide this person through that whole process. And unless you're certain about the end product and about chiropractic, and I mean, there's other levels of certainty here. You need to be certain about yourself, which is called self-esteem. I know we're going to talk about that in a second. But just around chiropractic, if you're not certain, you're dead in the water from the beginning, hopeless, you might as well pack it up and go home.
Well, and the challenge here is that I'm sure there's lots of people listening, and they're not 100% certain. So let's actually not tell them to pack it up and go home just yet. At least wait till the end of the episode. And
no, I'm saying if you're not certain, and if you cannot get certain around chiropractic, it's never going. That's what I'm talking about. Like, let me just be clear. If that didn't come across, 100% crystal clear, I'm saying if you're not certain and you are not willing to do the work to get certain, then you can pack it up and go home. You might as well just save yourself the agony, the money, the drama, the pain. You might as well just pack it up.
Yeah, it's an underlying foundational component for sure, is that you have to have certainty. It's one of the main reasons why you can have everything else wrong and be saying the craziest stuff and be absolutely certain in what you're saying, and you can actually attract people, you can keep people, you can be financially successful. We've seen this in the profession. There's lots of people. We see it all the time. Saying crazy things, doing crazy things, and things that are far outside the realm of reality, and yet they're successful in the terms of, having people show up, making money. Imagine if they actually were doing things that matched up with the reality. Imagine if they were actually doing things with a system. Imagine if they were actually saying things that weren't crazy to people and had that level of certainty. Now, obviously, that's what we're getting at here. That's what we're trying to create.
Yeah, I mean, here's the point. It's anti-reality what some of these people are saying, and it just goes to show you that, certainty when it comes to communication, certainty trumps even what's true.
Right. Yeah, and that's the point that we're making, right? We're trying to basically establish that certainty is, the big part of the solution. So when you're having these practice-specific challenges and you're having to deal with BS in practice, I found as my certainty goes up, there's a lot less BS in practice, right? So we're going to give you some strategies, some tactics, some ways that we've tried to address our own mindset, things that we've done to try and help ourselves in these situations. But the truth is, the biggest thing that I've done, and the biggest thing probably that you've done that's decreased the amount of practice-specific challenges, is certainty. And so that's the underlying piece to this. And one of the fundamental components of certainty, obviously, Horatio, you already hit on it, is self-esteem.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The two obviously are intertwined. Looking back, Jamie, I think we had this conversation before. I was really certain on chiropractic from really early in practice. I think I started the practice and I was really certain about chiropractic. I just wasn't certain about myself. I wasn't certain that people would buy me. So for me, the biggest shift in practice came when I started, working on my self-esteem.
Yeah, I can see that. You have that, because we both had a very clear understanding of third paradigm chiropractic. And, I was very passionate about it, as were you. But as you start to develop the self-esteem and become sufficient in that area, it's how you say things to people. It's how you communicate to people. It's how you give a recommendation. It's how you hold people accountable to an agreement. Those are the things that basically mitigate most of these practice challenges that we're going to talk about today. So not to say that the other things we're going to discuss aren't going to help you, just making it very clear that the number one most important thing you do, which is pretty much the case in all instances, is work on yourself, develop your self-esteem, develop certainty, and make sure that you're clear on what it is that you're actually doing in the context that you're practicing in. Now, I think another important point here, Horatio, and something that we can throw at a few different ideas, there's definitely some personality traits that I find helpful in dealing with challenges. Things like being persistent or being relentless, being adaptable. Is there anything that's really served you well in terms of, taking on a different personality trait, or at least amplifying one of your existing personality traits?
Well, it's funny that it's funny that you're bringing this up, because I was just thinking, I think it's really important that we talk about, why we're so certain on certain paradigm chiropractic, because it's not like I didn't explore the other paradigms, and why I'm so high on self-esteem. And I think that the key character trait that you have to have is, the willingness that you're going to be improving, but more importantly than that is, just having those really tough conversations and asking the really tough questions of yourself, and then not being fulfilled until you find an answer that's actually true.
Mm-hmm.
When we go back to chiropractic and we look at certainty in chiropractic, and when you look at, the people who are a lot of the technique gurus and a lot of the conversations that people are having in the profession, a lot of these arguments are really simple to dismiss if you have the right set of principles, if you're dealing with truth. It's just, unfortunately, most people don't want to, go through that painstaking mental labor to arrive to that conclusion. I think that is a huge positive character trait to have.
Right. I just think the funny part is it's just as painstaking, if not more, to not go through it. Really.
Here, look at it this way, right? Like a really simple question, why am I not where I want to be in practice? And most people will ask that question, but then, not bother to go through the painstaking and the torture that's going to be when you actually find out the reason. You don't want to experience that negative emotion. And if you don't want to experience that negative emotion, you're never going to get to a better level of practice.
Right. Yeah, I posted today on our Facebook page. I was just prepping for my training session today. And as I was prepping, I can't remember exactly what I was reading. I was pulling up my workout for the day and came across a quote by Henry Rollins. Good old,
nice.
Exactly, good old Henry Rollins. I thought it was really, it was telling, right? And so what the quote said was, "Strength is the product of struggle. You must do what others don't do in order to achieve what others won't achieve." And I just, I was like, yep, that's pretty much it.
Oh, right. FYI, I had a note on Henry Rollins. I contacted him to be on the Life by Design podcast, and he very politely declined.
Oh, well, that was nice of him.
Yeah. Oh, he was great. Let's not hide the facts here. I grew up, and Henry Rollins was like one of the guys that I idolized. I love Henry Rollins. I still love Henry Rollins.
Yeah. No, his writing is great, and he's got some really interesting commentary. So, and that point that he made is exactly what you were saying is, it's going through that struggle and developing the skill sets and the adaptability that comes from that and overcoming those things that really make somebody who they are. And so, again, we're going to go back to these practice-specific challenges, and there's a lot of pre-framing here because, just to jump into this, say, oh, what do you do when you have an angry patient? Well, without the contextual component here, without knowing that you have to develop your self-esteem, you have to have certainty, you have to be adaptable, you have to be relentless, you have to not take things personally. So there's all these components that lead up to handling these very well. But that said, let's jump into some of these practice-specific challenges. And, for those people listening in, guys, this is really, we haven't actually talked about these, Kreisha and I. We just made a list specifically because we wanted to have the commentary fresh, right? We wanted to make sure that what you're getting is a really raw feedback as to what we think about this, what our experience has been like. So, in fact, some of these Kreisha hasn't actually even heard, so it will be interesting to see what his thought process is about these. But let's jump into them, and here's what I want you to get out of this. I want you to get two things, I think. One is that we're experiencing many of the things that you're experiencing, or we have experienced many of the things that you are experiencing, or if you're a student, many of the things that you will, unfortunately, or fortunately, for that matter, experience in practice. So, been there, done that. The second part of it is that, the done that part is that we've overcome each of these at least once, if not overcome them enough times that we don't see them on a regular basis anymore. So, we want you to know that we are normal people. We are normal human chiropractors, and we go through all the same things that you do. This is our experience with this, and hopefully, I know that you'll pick up something very, very valuable with each of these, and when the experience does happen, hopefully you can pull that from today's episode and use that for yourself. So, Kreisha, I think the big part is, two things: managing mindset on these, and what have you done, what strategies, maybe some exact examples that you've gone through, and any tips or tactics. So the first one is, and I know you're going to love this to start with this topic, so people who drop out of care.
Okay, Okay, let's just since we're being authentic with this, I'm gonna be full up honest, and this is something that really still bothers me far too much, and for the wrong reasons. Now, let me explain. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting upset when somebody drops out of care, especially when, in your mind, you care about this human being and you know the future of them being in your practice and them receiving lifetime care. I don't think you'd care what you do if somebody dropped out and you didn't get upset. Now, I'd be lying if I didn't say that the way that I still react sometimes, it's less, but it's still far too often that I want. I don't get upset about that. I still get upset. I make it about me, right? Oh my God, I'm losing income. Oh my God, I'm not going to get to the certain numbers that I want to see. I don't like that reaction. So my strategy right now is just to remember how I want to handle it. I want to feel upset that they're not getting the benefit of having lifetime care. And I don't want to be bothered because the fact of the matter is we're running a business and people are going to leave. And that's just the reality of being an entrepreneur and being in chiropractic. Not everyone's going to be 100% satisfied. People are going to leave their jobs. They're going to move. It's normal for people to leave your practice.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think the big thing there is, although you're not looking forward to it, and although you're not necessarily hoping it's a bunch of people, it is a normal part of practice. And we've talked about this over and over and over at length on all the different podcasts. It's kind of the nature of things in this instance. People are going to leave. And so, once you get that in your head, not that you're, planning for it in the sense that you're expecting people just to go, but it's going to happen. It's a natural byproduct of, like I said, any entrepreneurial pursuit. Funny enough, I told this story, but I'll tell it again. When I started our first practice on Richmond Street in London, so funny thinking back to this stuff, right? It brings you back into that state and you just have a little chuckle or cry, whichever it is.
Or both at the same time, obviously.
So I remember thinking to myself, I'm so passionate. I understand this stuff. I'm going to have, literally, the words I would use in my head is, I'm going to have the perfect practice.
Nobody's going to leave.
Nobody's going to leave. I didn't think that if I explained it to them the way I knew I could, that they would ever go anywhere. It would be so logical. And, of course, I was following Reggie Gold at the time. And so, it was dirt cheap and next to nothing, pretty much a box in the wall. So I thought, well, there's no financial issue.
You solved everything, right?
I solved everything for them. What would be the issue? And, I remember, we covered the windows with the brown paper as we're doing renovations. And I remember, putting, I think I painted on the brown paper, something big is coming. I was passionate, and I was definitely a dreamer. And, of course, the only big thing that was coming was, the next month's rent coming out of my bank account. That was the only thing that was coming that was big. And so, I learned early that, maybe things weren't going to be as I thought they were. And same as you, you don't ever get used to people dropping out. Now, interestingly enough, and I don't know if it's just our different personalities, but I handle this very differently. So I don't take it personally. I wouldn't say I lash out, but, I think to myself, what's wrong with this person, right? That they don't understand.
Oh, I do that too. Don't get me wrong.
I think, what is wrong with this person? Are they obtuse? Like, how do they not know that this is great for them? How could they not understand? I mean, I have communicated this so clearly. And, for many of the people, they've had such an amazing subjective change to go along with the objective change. It blows my mind. And so one of the ways that we handle this really with our team, so my team gets that it's not supposed to be a common thing, is I want my team to be surprised when people say no. Right? Like, oh. In fact, in some of our team trainings and some of our protocols, depending on the specific situation, that's the response that they're trained to have. When somebody says something like, oh, I think I need to drop out, my staff needs to act extremely surprised as if you're the first person ever in the history of time to ever drop out of our practice. And we do have strategies in place and systems in place, like scheduling a special visit, having an authentic conversation with people. And, we've had lots of times where people were planning to drop out. It was something else. We were able to resolve it and care continued, either at the same schedule or some type of mitigated schedule. But the point is, after the initial emotion of it, make sure you have a system in place to process that, whether it be through a special visit or even your inactivation system. Just have something in place. The second one, Horatio, is what happens when you have unhappy patients?
This is one of those ones where I'm actually really proud. I'm actually proud that this doesn't come up anymore. So what would happen at the beginning, and I mean, it's interesting, like you said, looking back, is I was scared to enter into dialogue with people. All right, so this was one of those, low self-esteem, oh my God, it's almost like I tricked them into being in my practice, versus, I'm a great clinician, they need to be here. So what I've just started doing now, which has been great, is if I feel any discontent, if you know somebody's energy is down, I just ask them about it. Hey, is everything okay? I mean, even if something as open as especially when it comes to a progress assessment, one of the questions on the form is, are you happy with your chiropractic care? Yes or no? And if they circle yes, then we're great. And if they don't put anything, I ask them on the follow-up, because not putting anything usually means that there's a problem.
Right.
And this comes down to, the principle of killing the problem before it actually becomes a problem. Like, you just sense that something's wrong. This is like you get home. Like, look at it this way. You get home and your wife or your husband's giving you the silent treatment. It's just better to have that conversation the sooner the better, because if you leave it and it festers, it just becomes a bigger problem. So my self-esteem, the answer for me, principle-wise, is my self-esteem has grown, and I just ask them about it.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with that entirely, and just entering the conversation, right, preempting this before it becomes something else. Customer service needs to be a fundamental component of your practice and your business. And so on just, something that's conscious for you and your team is you want everybody to be enjoying their care. You want everybody to be engaged in the process. And if they're not, you might be able to say nothing for another month or two, and they might pay you for a few more visits. But eventually, if you don't tap into this and have this conversation, they're going to go. So, for us, similar question, do you have any questions for the doctor? Right, and that's on all of our forums, so they have a chance to voice their opinion if they want. And that's generally where people will do it. Oh, I'm not happy, or why is this not getting better, or I think I have to drop out, or whatever it is. That's usually where it goes. And so we can know that, and then we can preempt that. And again, the other piece of this that I will mention is this is where a staff is really, really important, right? Your staff engaging with people.
Because they don't tell you the problem.
That's right. That's right. And so we need to cover that in our post shift when staff says, hey, Bill said something really odd today, about he'll just let us know when he's going to schedule his next visit. So we need to be able to have some type of follow-up with that to make sure that, Bill's happy.
On the flip side of this, some of the practice members that I have had really challenging conversations with ended up becoming some of the best people that I take care of.
Yep, totally, for sure. The next one, Horatio, is, I don't know if you've had experience with this, but I have, so I'll ask you first, is regulating board BS.
Thankfully, I have not. So, I mean, here's the thing. I've been asked a lot of questions. So I remember there was a group of students, and some other chiropractors have reached out to me, and I find it really interesting that they reached out to me in this situation. They got in trouble with the board for various reasons, and they wanted to ask, and it's funny. One of the I guess, inherent traits of becoming a chiropractor and being counterculture all the time is when you get called to the board, you want to be counterculture. Like, you want to go in there like, Mike Tyson throwing all these haymakers, like you're going to be the one that dethrones the board. My advice in this situation is to try, just get through as soon as possible. Don't cause a ruckus. Apologize if you have to, and get back to practice. Because if you lose your license, you're going to be in a heap of a lot more trouble than, you stuck it to the board. You can't stick it to the board. It's a bureaucracy. You're going to lose every single time.
Yeah, no doubt. You just got to take your medicine and get on with it. And,
as bad as it sucks, it's like paying your taxes.
Sure. Yeah. You just have to do it. It's just how it goes.
Yeah. So tell your story, because you have way more insight.
Well, I mean, I don't have any major issues in the sense that there's nothing that I actually did wrong, per se.
No, I know exactly.
I have had a handful of complaints, all of them from one particular person who happens to be a fellow colleague. And, again, just dealing with that, sure, there's always stress involved in it. And as you said, the reason there's stress involved is because you're dealing with a bureaucracy, and whether I follow the rules or whether I interpret the rules and follow them the way I think that they should be, it's not in the end up to me. And so there's, a lack of control in that, which is stressful. And, the other part of it is the fact that it's another colleague, right? And that's the part that more than the board, the board's just doing their job, and somebody reports something to them, they have to follow up and do that. And so, the way I've handled that is, I don't want to say I've taken my medicine, because I haven't really had to go through anything extreme, but I have had to make certain changes to the practice. And I just do it, and I do it, and I do it with a smile on my face, and I get it done, and the practice moves on, and nothing becomes affected in a negative way. So aside from the first hour of me wanting to, take it out on somebody, once I give myself permission to have that, anger for a little bit, and then I get rid of it, then I can go ahead and just start getting things done.
Yeah, sorry, before we finish your plan, and I got something to add before we move on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, guys. Listen, if there's a problem with your board, if you're living, in a place where, I'm going to be totally open on, I love Ontario. I think Ontario is a great place to practice chiropractic. And I think there's a lot of good people who, when our board tries to do something, there's a lot of people that get involved politically and change it. We have a lot of great lobbying groups. The way that you're going to win over this political battle is not going in there like a one-man army trying to change things. That's a great way for you to harm yourself. Mm-hmm. The best way to do it is to support organizations that can help lobby the board and change the rules. But you don't have to be a martyr for anybody. Don't get yourself hurt, and don't use your license.
That's for sure. And the same thing applies to school. And I've been down that path, and some of my good friends who probably listen to the show have been down that path, and they've been penalized in big ways, thinking that they could actually change the school, and they didn't, and it only hurt them. Now, when it happens through the regulating board, and one of my colleagues does it, and I get angry, you want to take it out. But what do you do, Cratio, when it's your staff? What do you do when it's your team and your associates and things that they're doing? How do you handle that? How do you not get angry? How do you continue to be the leader? How do you address it and, get past that emotion that comes along with that?
Yep. So again, you're much better at handling the strategies with this. I'm going to handle staff on a macro level, meaning that the biggest mistakes that I see chiropractors making when it comes to staff is, number one, you don't instill or you don't help your staff, or you choose staff who have completely differing beliefs than you do. Right? So one of the reasons why it's easy for our staff to, be really certain when somebody misses an appointment is because they actually believe that the appointments are important for the people. One of the reasons that our staff has no problem selling, fish oil or greens is because our staff actually believe that this is a product that's going to help these people. Right? So if you bring in staff who doesn't on a macro, huge scale, believe the same things that you believe, you will never be able to convince that person. And you're going to look like a sleazy salesman trying to convince or, manipulate your staff into selling your products or your services, which is what they're going to think. So step number one is to make sure that you are selecting people who have similar beliefs. And step number two is to treat these people with respect. In the last, I hear chiropractors say this all the time. We'll just talk to my girls. Listen, your staff is not your girls. I heard a comment, Jamie, somebody said, well, I'll let the monkeys do it when they were referring to their staff. I was like, whoa, you call your staff monkeys? This is not appropriate language, guys. These people, you have to understand, your staff is on a mission with you. They are part of your organization. And if you're going to call them names like that and treat them poorly or at least think, in a derogatory manner that they're somehow below you because you're the doctor, that's bad news. That's bad news. My staff they are super valuable to what happens in my organization. They work really hard. They're great people, and they're my peers. I'm not above getting my hands dirty and getting messy. I'm ready to do everything in my practice if I need to do it. Mm-hmm. Those are the two main things as far as I can see.
Yeah, you'll have not just a tough time. It will be impossible to scale your business to an extraordinary level without a great team. And so the whole choosing the right people is extremely important, and Cratio hit the nail on the head with that. The other thing I'll add here is understanding who they are as people and developing them as people, right? So knowing their personality type, knowing how they like to be communicated with, knowing how they get motivated. Not everybody's motivated by money. Not everybody's motivated by you giving them a kick in the ass. Some people need to be pulled along. Some people are motivated by having more time or more freedom or being able to make a bigger impact. So, understanding your staff is a big part of avoiding staff issues. But then when you do have them, similar to what we're saying across the board here, is being willing to have the conversation, create an open space to be able to do that. We have employee reviews every 90 days, and my staff knows that if there's time in between that where they need to talk about something, they can. It doesn't really happen, but making sure you have those pieces put in place. The next few, Croatia, we'll whip through, but what do you do when you're tired? That's the one I talked about on our Facebook Live video last week because I was exhausted because I stayed up till 1:30 in the morning doing stuff and then got up to be at the office at 6 o'clock. What do you do when you're tired? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so number one is, don't pretend like I'm Superman. Like, it's okay to acknowledge that you're tired. Like, people get tired. There's a difference between acknowledging and bitching, Cynicism and negativity and bitching, those are things that I hate. So I don't become those people, but it's okay to let people know, hey, I'm tired, like I'm struggling. And then like a really practical, suggestion is get more rest.
I thought you were going to say drink more coffee.
No, I wish. I drink enough coffee. I think my coffee levels are like legitimately maxed out. But I think like just on a really simple level, like make sure, number one, let's not forget you're selling a healthcare product, so you should be practicing what you preach.
Sure.
And you should be like living everything that you're saying. So just get some more rest.
Yeah. No, I mean it's rare that I show up tired. That was a bit of an outlier circumstance, and of course, when you have two young kids, then it does happen.
You're tired all the time.
From time to time. I'm not actually tired. Again, this is part of my just makeup. I don't need a lot of sleep in order to feel energized. So I'm usually 12 o'clock, 11:45, and I'm up about 5:15. So, that's good for me. I'm pretty much good to go on that. But I did want to just mention with the coffee thing, something I was really excited about was at training camp, people brought me mugs from where they were.
They listened to you.
Yeah, they listen. So again, if you're, if I'm ever deserving of a special reward, a Starbucks mug from your area is absolutely perfect. Just a side note. Just saying, I'm just saying. Now this is a tough one, and I think a lot of docs let this happen. What do you do about home stress?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Well, the first thing, I mean, again, one of the things that I'm good at it now, I can say it, is I don't let things bleed over. One of the things that we have in our practice, and the staff has this too, is we call it a purple cow. So we're not allowed to talk about purple cows. And one of the things, in my practice that we are not allowed to talk about, and I never want brought up, is anything from my personal life. That is none of my staff's business. That is completely set aside. So I just don't talk about it. And I don't let the two bleed over. That's a hard rule, and I'm not willing to, do that. And when things are tough at home, when the kids are up, and work is almost like a release. Like you get to go to the office, you get to have some fun, you get to check people. So there's always this nice balance that happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. And once you get into the routine of that, it does get very, very easy and simple. And to comment on something my father-in-law said, who's also a corrective chiropractor, been doing it for 40 some years, he told me early on in knowing him is he always trained his team to wipe your feet at the door. That idea that the moment you walk in, yeah, me too, it was great. Just imagine there's a mat at the back door, and every time you walk in, you wipe your feet on the door, and you're leaving everything on that mat, and it's going to be there for you when you leave anyway. So you just pick it up on the way out, take it home.
Yeah, so one of our values, like one of our core values at Gainesville Family Chiropractic is to leave personal shit out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's a rule, and that's a conversation that I'll have. It's happened before, and it's been brought up, during the post-shift meeting, and I'll say, let's remember that our value is to leave personal shit out, and it seems like, you've let a little bit of, or I've let a little bit of, right? Here's the cool part is my staff calls me out. Like if I'm off, they're like, hey, this is one of our values. Like, talk about having a good belief system in your staff. Like one of the values is to leave personal shit, wipe your feet at the door.
Yep. No. Croatia, what do you do with, I don't know if you've had this experience. I actually haven't really had this in practice a lot, but what do you do with MD BS? MDs telling people not to come to your practice or telling, giving people bad advice. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so my personal philosophy on this, as much as, and I get that some people call the MD, I think that's so awesome. I think that would be amazing, and that would feel so great. I think at the end of the day, and we've talked about this at the podcast, it comes down to the end user, which is the individual. Clearly the sign is, here's the point. I've had lots of people who have had their MD tell them to stop coming, and they laugh at their doctor and they keep coming. And on the flip side, I've had people who have had the same conversation and they've stopped coming because the medical doctor, has told them. And my response is, well, it's your decision, but I always try to bring it back to, don't take chiropractic advice from a medical doctor, and that's why I don't give you medical advice. That's the conversation I have with the person. But inside I kind of make like the gun to my head, blow my brains out, because I can't believe, they're being feared into making a horrible decision for their health.
Right. Well, I always remember you go to seminars and you'd hear people from the stage talk about how they called up the MD and they, gave him a hard time or yelled at him or, basically, don't you dare ever, tell my patients to not come for chiropractic. And
yeah, that's inauthentic to me,
Well, I always wonder how often it's actually true. You know what I mean? It sounds like a really cool thing to do. And I know more than enough times people like to talk a big game when they're up in front of people. I've never personally done it, just to be honest. I've never personally called anybody. Now, I'm more of the ilk of having that conversation, like you said, making sure that the individual understands that, this is their choice, that, they're going to have to decide based on the information they have. And, we've been, very thankful that it's extremely rare. Maybe a couple times in my practice life where someone has actually stopped care or changed something because of a medical doctor.
Yep, us too. But it always kind of gets you. And like I said, at the end of the day, I don't want to replace the medical doctor and be the authoritarian figure in this person's life. I want this person to be an independent thinking human being that chooses to be in my practice. That's the type of lifelong relationship that I want to have with this person. Right.
And again, I guess the response that I usually have is very similar to what I said earlier. It's almost disbelief, right? So I have to stop coming because my medical doctor said so. What do you mean? Right? Like, sorry. Yeah. Do not compute. I don't know. I don't understand what you're trying to tell me here. Well, I need to stop coming because my medical doctor said not to. Okay, I still don't understand. Yeah. Right? Like that's usually my response if it ever has happened, and sparks the conversation and gets us to where we need to get to in that sense. And guys, there's so many other practice challenges that we could go through and kind of continued on with this episode, which is a great one. I'm sure people would like us to keep going. But here's the take-home point, right? The take-home point is, having the certainty and the self-esteem to have the conversations with people in your practice, with your staff, to know what to let go, right? Know what battles you need to fight and what battles, you need to opt out of in order to protect yourself and allow yourself to be able to practice chiropractic. And, once you get that in place, just being honest with people, being willing to, sit down with them. If you do that, and if you don't bring your stress from home, you don't bring other stresses from outside the practice inside the practice, then I think most of these practice challenges are going to dissipate or disappear entirely. So, guys, go to the show notes at lifebydesignforchiropractors.com/podcast. You'll find the show notes for today's episode and anything we talked about today. And thank you for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.